Hi, in this video, I'm going to give some advice for the AP Art and Design writing sections. I teach AP 2D art for photography students, but this should be able to apply to all students. I would like to say that I am not an AP reader, but I have been teaching AP for several years, and the majority of my students get fours and fives. And I did give a talk at the NAEA 2022 conference in which there were many readers in the audience, and they seemed to agree and affirm kind of the uh, ideas that I was saying, many of which are in this video. So, first of all, and I'm creating this video both for students and also for teachers. So students, recognize all the work that you've put into your art this year. You've done many things, and in terms of photographers, you have done and everybody all different things in terms of brainstorming. So you've worked with your idea and your sustained investigation. You've done lists and mind maps. Maybe you've done sketches or more developed sketches. You've come up with your idea has grown and changed. You've planned your photo shoots or your paintings or drawings or prints or whatever it may be. You've chosen locations and timing and colors, and maybe even use Google Maps or Street View. You've decided what your subject is going to be wearing. You've decided on lighting. Now, this applies to photographers, but again, even if you're painting and this is out of your head, you decide what people are wearing, you decide what kind of light is going to be in there. With photography, you've decided focal length and shutter speed and aperture, but same with painting, those kind of effects, and your angles and composition and all those kinds of things. You have also researched aspects of your idea to deepen your knowledge and learn new things and inspire ideas. So maybe you've looked at news articles or scientific aspects, social cultural aspects. Maybe you've watched movies, watched documentaries, looked at Google Images, poetry, music, all those kind of things. And so those are things that you have done to work on your SI. Maybe you've practiced all of your skills with photography, that's camera skills, editing, Photoshop skills, Lightroom skills, perfecting techniques you already know, other kind of materials, maybe 2D design skills. So again, that applies to painting and drawing, of course, as well. You've experimented, of course, that's a big part of the AP art and design. So, in terms of shooting, maybe you've experimented with angles and distance and orientation, your use of space, your camera controls, your lighting, all those kind of things. Maybe you've experimented with your editing, maybe you've done collage, or you've done really heavy photoshopping, removing things or adding things in or repeating them or printing them out on interesting materials. And of course, you have experimented with the creating. You've actually created your art, right? And all of these things are involved with that. And then after you've done all those things, you have reflected on your work, you have gotten critiques and feedback on your work, and you have revised your work, which again is part of the AP art and design process. So you have done all of these things. You've reflected on your work, and then you have revised. You maybe revised your idea. Maybe you revised your image by reshooting or redrawing or painting. Maybe you revised just the editing of an image. Maybe you revised what your plan is going forward on your SI. And then the last thing is during this year, you have thought about your materials and your process and how they back up your idea. So, what you photographed and how you photographed it gets across the idea behind your photos. And this will be important to the writing as well. So, brainstorm what are all the materials and processes that you've done? What have you photographed? Did you choose to do landscape, portraits, objects, indoors, outdoors, studio? What kind of colors did you use? The lighting, the clothing, the body language, the objects, the props, all those kind of things are actual materials. And then what you did with those is your process. So, how you shot it and your editing and all those kind of things and your composition, all of those things back up the idea. So you want to reflect upon that. Now, for your 100 characters for your sustained investigation, write what you included, what you did when you were creating, and why you did it. I have seen examples where people just kind of say for the materials, camera, Photoshop, whatever. But what I counsel my students to do is materials are actually what you chose to have in the frame. That's whether you're a photographer or what you chose to draw in the frame or anything else. This person had floral dresses, bright cardigans, and a grass field. And the process was to put them in candid position. And this artist says why they did it. So the candid positioning captures the joy in relationship, and the bright clothing emphasizes happiness. So again, what you included, what you did when you were creating, and why you did it. Here's another one. The things that are in here are family letters, photos of female family from the past, and a current photo of the family, and then combining them together. And then what she did, making this one transparent, has to do with loss of family members. So, what you included, and then what you did with it and why. This student had one that's more kind of purely visual, but saying that she used black and white to edit because she wanted the focus on the repetition and the supports of the structure. And she thought maybe color might distract from that because there were some bright colors in the images. Again, you might want to pause and read these, but the materials are the things that appear in here, and the process is what she did with them. And it is to get across the main idea of the SI, because that synthesis is part of your SI. It's much more in your selected works, but it is part of your SI. Again, what is in the image, and then what you did with it, and why included in here, because again, they are judging you in that rubric on your synthesis. Writing for process pages, because you're probably including process pages. I counsel my students to put in important information on the side here. Readers, it's my understanding, are not required to read a single thing on this process page, but they are required to read what's over here. So if you explain what's going on over here, it helps them to understand the process page. So this shows process, this shows experimentation, it has some of the final images, and it shows experimentation through physical altering. So really explaining that she cut things up and whatever, and she physically altered this. Or here, even saying that it includes feedback from peers and it has the revision plan. Again, they have to read this and it gives them context to understand this. And then feedback from peers and revision planning process demonstration demonstrates the reflection of my work, because they are looking for practice, experimentation, and revision. So this shows planning, this shows experimentation, this shows juxtaposition of elements, and all those things are everything that's on here is explained in the materials. Now for your 1200 characters, what I counsel my students to do is kind of explain the journey. So there's, it's 600 characters and 600 characters. And the first 600 characters is mostly about the idea. So we put together this list of active verbs because there might be many of these things that you did when you were coming up and developing and growing and changing your inquiry. Maybe you researched, maybe you interviewed, maybe you brainstormed, maybe you described things or identified, maybe you watched or listened, maybe you revised things, maybe you differentiated between things, So all of these are really good verbs, and it's also just kind of good to go along through them and say, which of these things that I did? And that will help you write that 600 characters. And then the second paragraph is about practice, experimentation and revision. So I counsel my students to actually use those words. I practiced blah, blah, blah. I experimented this and discovered this other thing. I then revised based on feedback, and changed this to that, right? And these are all the things that you do kind of in the creating. So the second paragraph is more about like the creation, is what I tell my students. Of course, one affects the other, so they can kind of overlap. And then when I give them the advice, whoops, sorry, I say to talk about the journey. I started doing this, and then I did this. Next, I did this. That led to this. So, explaining that investigation, just think if you were watching some crime show, I first interviewed all of the witnesses of the crime. And then I identified two main subjects. And then I tested the DNA. And then I checked their alibis, right? If you were going to explain a real crime investigation, you would do it kind of like a journey. So explain this one as a journey as well. And in the first paragraph, talk about the development of the idea and everything went into that. And the second one, talk about the actual creation and use those practice, experiment, and revise. So, oops. So here's one of my students who got a 5, the one who did the project on the sisters. So if you want to pause this and read it, that's fine. But she stated her inquiry, and then I decided to investigate this. I first did this, and as I began, I developed this other thing. And then upon shooting, I discovered this other thing, and then I explored. So it kind of tells the journey. Same thing in here, and she uses the word experimented, she uses the word revived, and then more action words as things evolved and practiced, and it led me to experiment. So again, explaining that journey. And here, this one was another student. And so again, if you want to pause and read this, but it kind of tells it in a story. And then writing for your selected works, it's what your idea is, what you included, what you did when you created, and why you did that to back up the idea. It's very similar actually to earlier with the SI. And again, your materials are anything that appears in your photo or your composition, and your process are you making all these active choices when you take your pictures uh, in order to get your idea across. Or, painting and drawing, you're making choices about mark making and color and all kinds of things in order to get some kind of idea across. So again, the idea to capture a moment someone looks into their past, I overlaid photos to show the passing of time. Toddler and young girl are the materials. Overlapping angles shift attention to changes in facial features over time. And black and white enables the viewer to focus solely on the shape of the person's face and not color, right? So again, this is what's included. This is the process in order to help get that idea across. And all these examples that I'm showing today all got 5s. So again, the commonalities and differences between sisters. And then these are all the things, she chose to put in a forest. She chose to have them wear beige leotards. She chose to change the contrast on both sides in terms of color. And then she explains that contrasting saturation juxtaposes sisters while matching leotards demonstrate their similarities. And if you want to pause and read these as well, but again, it explains what the idea is, what's in the picture, what they chose to be in the picture, how they chose to shoot it and edit it, and how that idea helps the idea get across. Again, if you want to pause and read. And that's it. So that is my advice overall. Hopefully you find it helpful. If you have any thoughts or ideas that you want to share with me, please leave a comment or contact me. And I hope this has been helpful.